Expedition Truth with your host, Jack Ashcraft.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm glad you've tuned in. Glad you're here. And I've been gone for a little while, and that's mainly because of the holiday, of course, the Thanksgiving holiday, which we weren't broadcasting that day. And over the past couple of weeks, I've been fighting off COVID, which is just a joy, just a joy. So if my voice is a little crazy tonight, then I ask you to please bear with me. I'm still struggling with a bit of congestion and a slight cough. But other than that, I'm doing fine. I mean, I started out having to take a visit to the hospital with a temperature of 102 degrees and my blood pressure bottoming out on me, 110/43, which is not good. And if you hear noise in the background, it's because my dog has decided to come in here and be a pest. So I apologize for that. She's gone now. So yeah, I had quite a rough past couple of weeks, but I'm feeling well, and I'm back in the saddle, as it were, and looking forward to tonight's discussion. My first guest tonight, I've got a couple of them for you. My first guest tonight has been on the show before. He has been involved in apologetics ministry since 1998. He has a master's degree in library science, and his articles have appeared in Christian Research Journal and Creation Magazine, as well as his own ministry's website, Tecton Apologetics, over at tectonics.org. And he has been referenced by authors such as Lee Strobel and Craig Kinnear. So he's no slouch, that's for sure. My guest tonight is J.P. Holding. J.P., welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much, and glad you're recovering nicely from that.
Yeah, I'm hanging in there. My wife would probably wish that I would go away many times over the past 2 weeks, but she was stuck with me in quarantine. The issue I wanted to address tonight, and because we're in December, the Advent season, and there are challenges to Christmas, both from atheists as well as from some of the more fringe Christians and pseudo-Christian cults like the Church of God, Worldwide Church of God splinter groups out there. And they all claim that Christmas is pagan. Now, where does this idea even come from, JP?
Well, mostly people's imaginations is what I'd have to say after a long time looking at that. This was such a major issue that people kept writing to me about it and asked if I'd put some research together in a book about it. And so I put together an ebook titled Christmas is Pagan and Other Myths some 5 or 7 years ago. Most of the people who come up with these ideas, they publish these books that are full of things like bad history, large fonts, photoshopped and mislabeled photos, and they're usually something like 20 or 30 pages, more like a pamphlet than a book that they put out. But they just pull ideas from all kinds of crazy places and make connections between ideas that really have no connection to each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with one of them, the Christmas tree. One of the things that I've seen is that the Christmas tree is condemned in the Old Testament and is actually part of some Babylonian worship. Are you familiar with that?
I'm very familiar with that one. That one was a lot of fun to look into. And the verse that's most commonly used in that comes from Jeremiah, chapter 10, verses 3 through 5, which speaks of one who cuts a tree out of the forest. And they say that they deck it with silver and gold and fasten it with nails and hammers and then use it as an object of worship. And somehow, even though Jeremiah was writing hundreds of years before Christmas, hundreds of years before Jesus, the idea is derived from Jeremiah's words that he's talking about a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm. But what is he actually talking about?
Based on what Old Testament scholars say, he is actually talking about a tree that the workman cuts down to make a wooden idol out of. and then he overlays it with silver and gold and fastens it with nails to someplace where it will be secure for worship, because of course they don't want their idol falling down on them. That would be very embarrassing.
Right. Right. So the whole canard of the Christmas tree is just that. And I often see a picture of one of these Babylonian gods holding something that looks like a tree. Are you familiar with that?
I have multiple pictures of that sort, and I'll bet one of them is the one you're thinking of. I found several pictures that were being misused in that way, and I sought them out by using a simple image search. And they range from people using pictures of Buddha's Bodhi tree to a carving from somewhere in Thailand that has nothing to do with Babylon. We have something like the Tree of Life, like the version of it from Assyria. I've seen that used.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a picture of a cypress tree that's been used. And that comes from a later picture of Jesus as the Good Shepherd.
Oh, wow. So yeah, this is just thoroughly refuted just
Exactly.
by the actual facts on the ground. Okay, let's go to the date of Christmas, December 25th. We're told that this has something to do with the worship of a pagan god. Again, what's that about? Explain that.
Well, I should start with a bit of background and answer the obvious question: is Jesus' birthday December 25th? And my answer is it has a 1 in 365 chance of being his birthday. The simple fact is most ancient people could not keep track of birthdays because they didn't have any way to keep track of time in a precise way. The way they kept track of time was, oh yeah, there's Jesus. He was born the same day that the goat was born. So that's how they kept track of time for the most part, unless they were very wealthy. As part of earlier research that I had done on a different topic, I had looked into ideas that there were various other pagan deities that were born on December 25th, which at the time in the ancient world was the winter solstice. Of course, now the winter solstice is much earlier. It's something like December 21st. I looked into each of those deities to see if there was any evidence that any of them were born on December 25th. And I found exactly zero evidence that any of them were born on December 25th.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes such deities as Mithra, Dionysus, Attis, just a whole gamut of them, maybe about a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that all of them had a birthday on December 25th, but they weren't copying each other. It's only the Christians who were copying all the pagans. That's how it worked out, apparently.
Of course. I've actually even seen claims that the giving of gifts is pagan in origin.
Well, yeah, I'm sure no one gave a gift without worshiping a pagan god. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the claims are really strange.
They are.
What are some of the most absurd that you've come across in your research?
Well, the Christmas tree one was particularly fun. Let me see what else I've got here. I dug around for anything I could find. Oh, all right. Here's one of my favorite. The Christmas tree is a pagan altar, and the pole, the decorations, and the tinsel are all sexual symbols representing male sexual organs.
Okay, that's an odd one.
That's a very odd one. So you can turn just about anything of us, like Freud would say, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Another one of my favorites is that in 1909, the name Mazda, which was the name of a pagan deity from Persia, was used by General Electric as a brand name for Christmas lights. Now, I don't know what that's supposed to signify, but if you're driving a Mazda vehicle right now, I'd suggest you repent.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what it would be. Some of the favorite myths that I had were related to St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very interesting history, which I don't have a lot of time to go over, but St. Nicholas was an entirely different figure in church history who had some very vague similarities to what we call Santa Claus. But the two figures were merged somewhat later in history, and obviously the original St. Nicholas was nothing like the Santa Claus that we know now. He wasn't going down chimneys or anything like that. But there have been strained efforts to make a connection between the two, and connect him to the Nicolaitans recorded in the Bible, who were and to say that they were some kind of heretical sect, and that's what it's all based in. Another favorite of mine is that when kids sit on Santa's lap, they're basically sitting in the arms of Molech in order to be sacrificed.
Wow. Some of
Yeah,
this stuff is just bizarre.
it's
Now,
extremely bizarre.
with the case of St. Nicholas, if I remember correctly, he was at the Council of Nicaea.
He wasn't about the same period, and yeah,
Yeah,
there is some thought that he was there. Of course, we don't have a whole lot of precise records from
right,
that exact time, but yeah, there's a chance of that.
right.
And
There's a tradition that he slapped Arius in the face at that
well,
council, and so I say if we're going to keep Christmas traditions in keeping with Saint Nicholas, then we should start slapping heretics on Christmas. What do
well,
you What do you
but
think?
what you don't realize is that what actually happened is he gave Arius coal. That's what actually happened. Some of the comparisons I like here. Now, there are some efforts to make Santa and Jesus parallel figures, supposedly, so Santa's around to replace Jesus. Santa is omniscient like Jesus because he knows all about the children and whether they're bad or good. Let's see what else.
Okay.
Let's see, and Santa is omnipresent because he's in every mall. And let's see. Like Jesus, Santa asked children to obey their parents. Well, I guess James Dobson is in big trouble too, then.
Yeah, that makes him evil.
Yeah, very evil. And Santa had Rudolph's shining nose to guide him the way Jesus had a star to lead the Magi.
Wow, this stuff is really just reaching.
It is. This is stuff I've actually dug out from some of these crazy books that I picked up.
Now, how much of this literature that you found these crazy ideas in, how much of it comes from like these fringe fundamentalists?
Well, oddly enough, most of it does. There was an atheist or two in the mix as well who picked up the same thing. There was a website called christmasalie.com, which I picked up a lot of stuff from. And since I wrote the ebook, he has made it so that you can't get into his site without registering, which I found somewhat interesting.
Hmm.
There was a book called Our Pagan Christmas by R.J. Condon, put out by the American Atheist Press. That was like a 20-page sort of track thing. On the other hand, we have a book by Sheldon Emery called Is Christmas Christian? And he was more one of the fringe fundamentalist types.
Mhm.
And that thing looks like someone's scrapbook more than a professional book. And interestingly about Emery, he's one of those people who was part of this racist sect that believes only white people can be saved.
Oh, some of those Christian identity groups.
Yes,
Correct?
exactly. That's exactly
Oh,
what he was
wow.
part of. Yeah.
Yeah. Those
And let's
those
see.
those proliferated, I guess, in the 60s and 70s.
Wow. Yeah. Well, he took a little trip into Christmas as well. And then I have one by Cheryl Sanchez called Jesus is Not the Reason for the Season, from someone who has a master's in biblical studies from this tiny college in Australia. Certainly not a scholar of any kind. Now, in contrast to refute these people, I picked up some interesting books that I can recommend. There's Bruce Forbes' Christmas: A Candid History, Susan Rule's Toward the Origins of Christmas, ROLL, and Jerry Bowler, Gerry Bowler, Bowler, Santa Claus: A Biography. I got a lot of the good history that I picked up from these sources, and they provide a much more balanced and scholarly view of the origins of Christmas.
Mm-hmm. So what are the actual origins of Christmas, if you can encapsulate it?
Well, yeah, that is a long story. It's very hard to encapsulate, but we
Right.
owe a lot of that to Germany in like the 1500s and 1600s, starting about that time. But most of the symbols and such that we have now, like Santa Claus, go back to like the 1800s. For example, the famous cartoonist Thomas Nast was the one who basically put Santa Claus together as we know him in terms of his appearance. It was Nast who put him into like a red coat. There were various depictions of Santa Claus even before that time, and there was no consistent view of what he looked like. One of my favorites had him look like something like a cross between one of those Russian dancers that kicks his feet up and down and a leprechaun. A lot of this was also based in like songs that were created in the 19th and 20th century. Some of the things that we celebrate today. It's been a long time being put together.
Hmm. And the Christmas tree, does it have a very logical origin?
15s and 1600s Germany seems to be where we can trace it to. And there's some evidence that pagans cut down trees too. But think about this. They live in a place not like Florida where I am. They live in a place where it's cold and dreary and dark. And what could make you feel better in the middle of winter than to bring a bright green tree into your house?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a certain psychological boost, and that's where that kind of thing actually started. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with that in turning it to our own use. I mean, the Christians in the early church period would take, for example, there was a depiction of the pagan god Mithra slaying the bull. They would turn that into Samson slaying the lion, and what they were doing was claiming the idea for their own and saying, no, the true God owns all these ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and we're taking it over.
Yeah, you see the same thing in some of the pagan temples in Rome.
Yes.
Christians took over those formerly pagan temples and used them for the worship of the one true God. Here's one that I was hit with just the other day. Mistletoe. Now, the Druids are purported to have used mistletoe in their rites and rituals and considered it a sacred plant. And so the claim is that when we use mistletoe, that we're actually engaging in Druidic practices. Are you familiar with that one?
I've seen that one, and yeah, well, since the Druids also used basil and lemon, I guess I can't be cooking any chicken dishes this weekend with any of that. Yeah, that is one I ran into, and there's the source that's usually cited for that comes from 1912 and was by someone who wasn't an expert in anything of this sort. It was just pretty much speculation on their part. The author's name is Clement Miles, and the book was called Christmas Customs and Traditions. Basically, he just assumed, looked at the parallels, tried to find parallels in a very broad sense, and then made them more exact, or claim that there was some kind of connection. But as far as hard proof, there's nothing really definitive as to when the mistletoe started being used for Christmas. The earliest reference I found to kissing under the mistletoe came from a British magazine in 1817, and it doesn't explain where the custom came from.
So yeah, again, when we look at these, they all seem to be, relatively recent, 15th to, 19th centuries. Doesn't seem to be anything predating the 15th. So the claimed connections to Babylonian paganism, etc., it just seems to be just so much hot air.
It's like having a connect the dots and drawing from dot 1 to 100 and saying, "Oh, look, a horsey." That's what it amounts to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The date of December 25th. How did the church arrive at using that date? Since we don't really know Jesus' birthday, but why the choice of December 25th?
Well, there was at least one church father who did come up with that as a date, but they had other dates proposed as well, including early January, sometime in Easter. It is possible that this was a case of Christians doing one of those things, like we mentioned before, of claiming the date for themselves, because there were some pagan festivals at the winter solstice. And if I liken it to a department store having a sale. If you're a major department store and you want to keep people from going to your competition when they have a sale, you have a sale the same day. Mm-hmm. And so it's quite possible that some people in the early church decided, well, we'll celebrate something on the winter solstice as well, and that will keep people from being tempted to go to the pagan festivals that are happening on the same date. So this is another one of those gradual things. There are many different ideas about where it came from, but I couldn't find any real consensus about how it developed exactly.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you wrote a book on this, correct?
Yeah, so an ebook on Kindle ebook called Christmas is Pagan and Other Myths.
Okay, and that's available on Amazon and Kindle both, correct?
It is indeed, yes.
Okay. Where can listeners go to connect with your ministry and look over the books you've written? Because you've written quite a bit that is, I think, essential reading if you're interested in apologetics.
I appreciate that. Well, my website is tectonics.org, TEKTONICS.org. I always tell people, remember it's .org, because if you put in .com, you'll get an engineering firm, and they don't want to hear from you about Jesus. That's for sure. I do have a link on top of my page, Amazon author page, and that will take you to the list of the books that I have available via Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess you're spending Christmas with family, correct?
Well, I'll tell you what's odd is we were married on December 22nd, which was the winter solstice at the time. Whoops, we're pagans, and we will actually be celebrating our 30th anniversary coming up this year.
Oh, wow.
And so we'll be taking a week off now. So no, we're the only family we have, we don't want to expose them at any risk. So we're going to be spending it pretty much on our own at this time. But that's fine because 30-year celebration. It's a good time to be on our own.
Yeah, well, congratulations to you both.
Thank you very much.
That's outstanding. I'm coming up on 21 years myself.
Well, you'll catch up eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate you being on the program. It's always fascinating to discuss these topics with you because so much confusion out there on issues that really shouldn't be that confusing, as you know.
Yes, indeed. It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah.
And we'll definitely have you back on again, that's for sure. Again, folks, if you want to connect with JP Holding and learn more about his apologetics ministry or get his books, that website is tectonics.org. ORG, yeah. Frank, thanks. Saved me there. Tectonics.org. I strongly urge you to go there, read the articles. He also has a great YouTube channel where he does the animation and the voiceovers for the characters. Again, apologetics-oriented stuff, which we actually viewed some of them in an apologetics class I took in seminary. Just thought I'd tell you that.
Oh,
all
wow.
right. We'll be back with more.